guys to be seated.
Good morning. It's great to be together. Good to have everybody here. I am in an unusual place in that Wes is out of town, Noah's out of town, so it's been a little different here this morning, and then Emma has been out of town visiting our daughter Caroline, and I am pretty discombobulated between those two things. And I have to take care of two dogs all weekend on my own has been a new thing for me. But it's just good to be here. And as we kind of walk into the Easter season, it's a great space to be in before Palm Sunday and just kind of think about what it must have been like that last week before Palm Sunday for the disciples, for Jesus. And we're going to take a look at some of that as we go along for the next 3 weeks. I will tell you that for Easter, also on this QR code, if you want to kind of take notes as we're going along in our sermons now, we've put that in the app. And it's a great little feature that we've been working on the last few weeks. And so you can hit that QR code and it will take you to this service, and you can either watch it live, which I would not recommend if you're in a seat, or you can click Take Notes, which is actually a great thing to you have all the notes for the sermon that are somewhat pre-populated, and you can just take notes right in the app if you'd like to do that. So we'd welcome you to do that. I want to just make you aware of a couple things coming up. The Easter sunrise service will be in 2 weeks, and at 7 a.m. we're going to meet actually in the amphitheater, the Queen's Courtyard, basically. So if you walk about probably 50 yards from here, kind of in that direction, that's where we'll meet for the sunrise service. We usually meet out here, and we're going to transition to that space for this next one. And then also the Easter service in 2 weeks will be at 10 o'clock. And we'd love for you to come to that. That'll be in here, kind of normal service in the chapel. I would recommend that you get here a little bit early for parking, and pay attention to the Wednesday email, because we'll put some parking instructions there. That typically is a Sunday that's a little bit tougher to find a space, and there are 2 or 3 other options for parking that can help you. So I am going to talk this morning about unreasonable hospitality. We kind of had this in-between week between the series we did on milestones that we just finished up, and then also the Easter season with Palm Sunday and Easter. And I'm going to be talking about unreasonable hospitality. I read this book, Unreasonable Hospitality, recently. And matter of fact, this is an extra copy. If you have not read this book, I will tell you it's a completely a business book, basically written by a guy who took a restaurant to #1 in the world. His name is Will Guidara. This is a little picture of him. But it's an outstanding book for business. But I read it and really took a lot for just different things, but I really started thinking about what would that look like in the church? What would it look like at Waypoint if we took some of the principles in the book and applied unreasonable hospitality to the principles in the church? And so we're going to talk about that this morning, kind of an in-between time. The subtitle to this book is The Remarkable Power of Giving People More Than They Expect. And so I just thought, Wes and I were talking about what to do this week, and I thought, let's go in that direction, and we'll kind of talk about what that means from a biblical standpoint. But here's what Guidara says. He says, what it comes down to is, in the age of tech, especially with AI impacting our lives, everyone craves a little genuine human contact. Who isn't going to love someone spontaneously being nice to you? And that's the idea. It isn't so much in the restaurant business. They were all about, certainly the incredible meal, an incredible setting, environment to eat a meal. An incredible restaurant up in New York that he ran. But it also is more than that. It's about making contact with people. And from a biblical standpoint, that's what intrigued me the most, and that's why I wanted to kind of go in this direction. I was doing some research online, and I found this article actually from the Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. She is the dean of students at Gordon Conwell, Jana Holliday. And she said, hospitality is unexpected thoughtfulness in relationships as we care for others. And I don't know about y'all, but that line struck me, because when I think about hospitality, I think of setting the table right, and making sure you blow the leaves off the front porch when the people are arriving and things like that, getting stuff done. But when she said in relationships, it really struck me. And I think that's part of the difference in unreasonable hospitality, in the idea of Guidara's book, is really about connecting with people. And so I want to just explore this morning how that might look at Waypoint if we take a biblical take on this. So that's the question for this morning. It's a real simple one. The idea is, what would it look like if Waypoint became a church community in Charlotte with unreasonable biblical hospitality. When I first typed that up, working this week, I typed up biblically unreasonable hospitality. And I thought, I don't want to say that, right? Because honestly, I think that's a lot of times what happens with the church is we get a little biblically unreasonable, right? We take our slant on theology, and often what the world sees, what people walking in see, is unreasonable people that land on biblical ideals that may or may not necessarily be actually in the Bible. And so I think it's a little bit different to say, what does unreasonable biblical hospitality look like? And that's really what we're going to talk about this morning. And so I want to start with some verses. John 12 is time-wise with where we are in the Easter season. I wanted to just mention these verses because I think it illustrates that sometimes hospitality is extravagant. And there are times when I think that makes the difference for someone seeing how much you care for them. So this is the story. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. And here a dinner was given in his honor. Martha served while Lazarus was sitting among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. So Mary takes this incredibly expensive bottle of perfume that you would not use for this kind of purpose. And she does this extraordinary thing, this extravagant gift to Jesus because we were talking earlier and Mark said, I think Mary realized who he was in the moment. And I think that there's some truth to that she understood something's getting ready to happen. Maybe the Lord had put that on her heart, that she understood something was getting ready to happen that was going to be different. And so she takes this expensive bottle and washes his feet with it, wipes her feet with her hair. Incredible scene of just extravagance. And then I want you to see what happens, because I think sometimes when we are extravagant with hospitality, this is what sometimes happens. So one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who would later betray him, objected, why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. So it's a whole year's worth of wages, 300 denarii. And Judas is sitting there going, we could have done way better things with this than that, right? But then look what it says about Judas. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. I don't know if you knew that about Judas, but that's a pretty amazing thing. One of the 12 disciples, in a matter of days, he will get served the Last Supper by Jesus. Gets served the Last Supper, and yet Jesus knows, and all the other disciples know, that he's been taking stuff out of the hopper to kind of fund his own enterprise stuff. And so he's taking money. He gets 30 pieces of silver for betraying Jesus later on, and it's a pretty incredible story that he used to help himself. But then Jesus says, leave her alone. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. What a beautiful statement from Jesus. By the way, sometimes we take that, you will always have the poor among me, to Jesus saying, don't worry about the poor, right? That's not at all what was going on. I was actually coincidentally, providentially, reading in Deuteronomy 14 yesterday. And in that chapter, 14 and 15, in that chapter, it's Moses talking to the Israelites before he passes away. And he says to them, remember this command from the Lord, basically, that you'll always have the poor with you and that you need to take care of them. So Jesus was not saying, don't worry about the poor. He was actually quoting Deuteronomy there and referencing back to take care of the poor. But in this moment, she has done a beautiful thing. And I just want to point that out as we head toward the rest of what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to throw a few verses up that I think talk about hospitality and share a couple stories from my own life where I didn't do as good a job with hospitality, I'll put it that way. So this is one of the first ones. This is Romans 12. I love the Message version of this verse. Don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled in the flame. Be alert servants of the master, cheerfully expectant. Don't quit in hard times. Pray all the harder. Help needy Christians. Be inventive in hospitality. And I love that phrase, be inventive in hospitality. That is a beautiful statement to say, don't just go through the motions whether you're in business or having people over for dinner. Don't just go through the motions, but be inventive. What could I do differently for this person or these people that would make an impact for the kingdom, for Christ in their lives? And it's a great question to ask. My son Steady and I had listened to this book on audio as well, and Steady actually called me, left a voicemail message. I said, hey, you remember in the end of chapter 16, and he pointed out that in that Gadara talks about when he was coming up in the restaurant business at one of the restaurants, he noticed the difference between the servers that were being attentive and those that were paying attention. And I love that he left me this voicemail because it's a great illustration, right? The attentive servers were taking care of people. They were refilling their water. They were taking care of the meal, putting a napkin on it. They were doing the things that you needed to do as a server that were part of the food experience, the eating experience. The paying attention servers, though, did it a little bit differently. They were paying attention to what that particular table's occupants' needs were. And there's a big difference, I think, in business and certainly in the church. As we look at the church, there's a difference between being attentive and going through the motions and paying attention to what people need. As an illustration, there are many examples in this book, but one of the examples I loved was there was a family who was going by 11 Madison Park, which is the restaurant in New York that became number one, and they go to the restaurant right before they go to the airport. And the kids, it was a mom and dad, and I think 2 kids, and the kids were incredibly disappointed because they hadn't got to do anything in the snow, and they were from an area of the country that didn't get snow. And so these 2 kids are kind of disappointed by that. So the server hears that. 11 Madison Park staff go out and purchase sleds. Then they get a limo, and they take the family to a hill and let the kids sled down the hill on their own dime, right? I mean, on the restaurant's dime. They let the kids sled down the hill and go sleigh riding and go sledding before they have to go to the airport. That's paying attention. And I would just invite us, as we think biblically about this concept, what do we need to be doing as a community of believers to be paying attention to people when they come in the door, to be paying attention to people's needs when they express a prayer need, which is something we're going to do in a little bit with praise and prayer. And the idea of, as a biblical community, what might we do that would be the difference between going through the motions of church and paying attention to people and relationships. So just invite us to think about that. One of my other favorite verses in terms of hospitality is Hebrews 13. Keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers. For by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Now, I'm not going to get into that part of it, although that's a pretty cool part, honestly. And I know some stories could tell you there about people that definitely entertained angels and didn't realize it. But this idea here of showing hospitality to strangers, that's something that we don't think of. I don't know about y'all. I don't typically think of showing hospitality to strangers. I think of it as showing it to friends. And when Emma and our Tenebrae is a great example. When y'all come over for Tenebrae, I don't think about strangers and how are we going to take care of strangers at the house. I would love it if a stranger showed up to Tenebrae, honestly, this year. And they show up in our community a lot, right? And I don't mean strangers like different, strange, weird. I mean strangers in that I don't know that person. And one of the things we can do as a biblical community is how are we taking care of people that walk in the door. I will tell you this from being in church ministry for a long time, being a Christian for a long time. Typically Christians, when we come to church, we get pretty focused on connecting with our friends. And I get focused on kind of talking to my friends, and I often will miss the person who doesn't know anybody. And there's a stat that Ken Schultz and I used to talk about that it is within 6 months to 2 years of somebody coming to faith in Christ, they typically have, at the end of 2 years, 0 non-Christian relationships. Because what happens is we drift into the familiar and we forget kind of where we've come from, spiritually speaking. We forget where we've come from, and we forget that there are people that probably we need to connect with when they're walking in the door of this church. And I would just invite us to think about, as a community, what would it look like if every time a stranger comes in the door of Waypoint on a Sunday morning or any other place, that we connect with them relationally, pay attention to what's going on in their life. I want to tell you just a quick story that's one of those stories that I can just tell you, I've never forgotten this story. I was in French Canada in 1992, and I was there for the summer it was a missions project. And it was a really tough missions project for me. I'm an introvert, as I've said many times, and the gospel motivates me to connect with people, but left to my own, if I need to recharge, I need to be by myself. That's just the way I'm wired, right? But I didn't know it when I went there, but basically what we had to do as part of the mission project with Operation Mobilization is I had to travel door to door in French Canada. Now, I speak some French, but not that much, right? So I'm traveling door to door for a month, and I would have to go knock on the doors. And I was by myself, right? By myself, I'd knock on the door in French Canada, and usually they'd open the door and say, "Wait, what? Yes, what do you want?" And the very first thing I had to say, this was a script that they taught us to say, "Je ne suis pas un témoin de Jehovah." I'm not a Jehovah's Witness. It was the very first thing. It was the very first thing I had to say, because otherwise they'd shut the door in our face because they were so used to that, right? So that's the first thing I had to say. I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, right? And then I would say, "Mais j'ai un petit gâteau pour vous," which I have a small gift for you. And that was hopefully opening the door to a conversation with them. That was the toughest month of my life, going door to door as an introvert, speaking a foreign language, trying to connect with people. That was tough, I'm going to tell you. But the toughest part was a little bit later that month. We were in a park, and we had decided to kind of do this evangelism event where we were going to sing some songs, and the guy, Vince, who spoke fluent French, was going to speak at the end of the time. And so we go to this park, y'all, and I'm playing guitar and leading us in songs in French. And so I'm sitting there playing the guitar, and this one guy comes up to me, and he's really drunk and really belligerent. And he comes up, and I'm holding the guitar like this, and he keeps poking the neck of my guitar, like really hitting it. It was a brand new guitar. So I'm thinking, Jesus loves you, but I don't so much right now. And I mean, really, he was really messing with me and hitting the strings as I was playing the song, like not just in between. So he's really kind of messing with me. And I could tell there was this other older guy who was inciting people to just do stuff while we were there. I mean, it was a pretty amazing scene. I'll tell you about it over coffee if you want to hear more. But bottom line is, this guy basically then backs off, and then I could tell he got really sad. Because I think the Lord was working in his life, because he was hearing what Vince was saying. And it was a pretty amazing deal. Vince and I were co-team leaders on this deal, so we had to get to this church dinner that was right after this. And so we get done, we're kind of packing up, and that same guy comes up and is talking. He wants to talk, and I can't really talk to him in depth. So Vince is talking to him a little bit, and at some point, we'd already packed up, and we were going to be late for dinner if we didn't leave, because we had like a 30-minute drive. And I said, "Vince, man, just give him one of our Bibles and just tell him we got to go." And so, and I was all focused on packing up the guitar, getting everything together. These are the Bibles we handed out. These are Gideon Bibles. They were green just like this. They were in French, Nouveau Testament. But this is what we would hand out often when we were door to door. And this is what I said, "Vince, just give him one of the Bibles and one of the tracks we had." And I said, tell him we got to go. I will never forget this as long as I live. The guy walked off with his head down with the Bible in his hand. And he walks across the bridge. We were on an island in the park, and he walks across the bridge, got to the mainland, and he's halfway across the bridge. And I'm not really watching him, but I watched him when I heard what happened. He screamed at the top of his lungs, a blood-curdling, I don't know how to describe the scream other than completely frustrated and empty. And he took the Bible, and he threw it, and it would have cleared the back door of Belk Chapel, threw it into the middle of the lake, and then he ran off. I will never forget it, because I had been somewhat attentive, but I had not been paying attention. And there was a stranger in my midst, and y'all, I completely missed it. I was more focused on getting to a church dinner and honoring the people that had kind of sent us. So I said, just give him a Bible and send him on his way. I don't want us to be that kind of community. And so that's why I say, let's talk about when strangers come in, let's pay attention. and not just be attentive. It's just an incredible, again, life-changing moment where I realized that evangelism truly is about relationships, and the emptiness of it, if I'm just dropping something in somebody's lap in the same way, if I'm a server and I'm just going through the motions, it's a completely different experience for the person, and that's what happened that day, and I've never forgotten how important relationships are. Last couple verses here. 1 Peter 4, 9 and 10 is another great set of verses. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. And I'll just say, you can see in the notes if you're in the app right now, but what I love about this, it says without grumbling, and it says whatever gift. And so I just want to encourage you, in terms of your gift for hospitality, in terms of biblical hospitality, it may not be standing up and preaching. It may not be doing even base camp. It may, you know what God's gifted you to be, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But I want you to be thinking about what is the gift God's given you that would enable you to serve the Lord and serve other people. Those are the things that we've got to think about individually and as a community in terms of hospitality. How am I going to really step into the relationship and pay attention to somebody, not knowing what they need until I really find out more about them? For me, I will tell you, Isaiah 58:12 this hangs in my office at home. You may not be able to read it, but that plaque, I don't know how many years ago. It looks like it's on a dot matrix printer. It's so old. But that's the verse for me that God used to really kind of change my life. It says, you use the old rubble of past lives to build anew. And I was not living in Charlotte at the time. Rebuild the foundations from out of your past. And that was one of the reasons I came back to Charlotte. And I came back because I felt like the Lord had called me to do that. You'll be known as those who can fix anything. If you don't know me, I'd love to fix stuff. Love to work with wood and all that kind of stuff. Restore old ruins, rebuild and renovate. Make the community livable again. Isaiah 58:12, that's the Message version. And I realized one of the other versions, I was like, Lord, what is this? How does this really connect with your calling for my life? And I realized I was thinking about stuff and about organizationally, how am I going to fulfill my calling? The Message version helped me realize it was about people and relationships. I don't know what your call is. I'm not showing you that for any other reason to say, we'll talk about this at the coordinates, but I think you ought to think about what's your primary gift or primary one or two gifts the Lord's given you, right? And how are you going to put those into practice and use a verse to kind of back up how the Lord's calling you to? Last verse here, Galatians 6, 4, and 5. And again, I'm using the Message a lot today because it's just a little bit different and it speaks to the issue, I think, a little better in this case. Make a careful exploration of who you are and the work that you have been given, and then sink yourself into that. So the work you've been given, and sink yourself into that. It's your calling, your commitment, and your creative best in this verse. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. Each of you must take responsibility for doing the creative best you can with your own life. What a great verse. I hope that encourages you and challenges you like it does me to go figure out, Lord, what's my call? What's my commitment to that call? And what's my creative best that I can pour into that? And I'm not just talking about Waypoint. One of the beautiful pictures of Waypoint is not that we are a church that comes in here and is the church on Sunday mornings. But the vision from the start that Wes has laid out is an equipping church. We often show a map of all the Waypointers around Charlotte. And the point is that Waypoint is not here in Belk Chapel. It is on Sunday mornings. We come together. But really, Waypoint is about being out with who you are in your job, with your family, driving the car you drive, living in the house, in the neighborhood where you live, and connecting in the community in which you're connected. That's really what Waypoint is about. It's not just about Sunday mornings. It's about really being out there and sinking yourself into where God's called you and how he's called you to live life for him. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop there. And this is the great part of the service where we call it praise and prayer. And it is a chance where Waypoint really has an opportunity to be a little different in that we invite people to come up and share. And I don't have the slide up here, Ann, I'm sorry, but you can come on up. Ann Hilburn's going to come on up this morning and just share her story. We're just delighted to have Ann. She actually is, she may say it, but she is involved with ECO at a much higher level. And it's just a beautiful thing how she's served the Lord. She and her husband Scott have both served the Lord as pastors. And just delighted to have her come and share what the Lord's doing in her life and where you need him to show up.
And thank you, Chip. And God forgives you. In 2020, we were at a worship service at Carmel Presbyterian, and you all commissioned me to go to the beach. It was rough. To pastor a church as a transitional pastor. And meanwhile, Scott was in Charlotte pastoring his church near Weddington. We thought, and you thought, that we would be living in Wilmington and going to Wilmington at the end of my call, and I'll tell the story by timeline today, but in 2022, we came back to Charlotte. My call was over, and my work was completed, and we were living together in a townhouse that we were renting because, well, we had sold our house during that bubble. And so, in January of 2022, which we call 2022 GOO, Scott was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. And so my call shifted to serving our family. I'm not domestically inclined. But I know I'm not. But I am a good advocate and encourager. And so, as you know, when a family receives a cancer diagnosis or any kind of serious diagnosis, one of the immediate responses is fear. And it's fear of loss. As we grasp reality, Scott and I just said to each other, we want to do this well. We're not going to do it perfectly, we know that, but we want to take this journey well. We want to be faithful. We want to be faithful in our witness. And so we asked God, how do we do this? And we asked him, what do you want to do in us and for us? And then we spent the first part of 2022 asking God, where do you want us to retire? Where do you want us to live? Do you want us to live in Wilmington, where we had planned to build? Or do you want us to stay in Charlotte, mainly for medical treatment, and to be near our daughter, Katie, and our friends? Where will our medical team be? And the Lord led us to stay in Charlotte, and here we are. We're back. But you know what? God had more than our physical health in mind. He showed us that he also cared about the health of our souls. And he is increasing the health of our marriage, the health of our family. He is increasing our faith, deepening it, and even giving us a clearer, eternal perspective for life on earth. For example, I've learned to forgive more readily. I'm back in that kind of mom mode when you have little children, and I'm back in, Lord, I want to grow in love sacrificially. You know what? God wanted us here for the creative hospitality that you all extend. In May of 2022, my mother died, and Lindsay and I had known each other for a long time, and 3 times she asked me, would you like to talk, because she knew I wouldn't ask. She listened. The week my mom died, Amy was sitting right there in a pew, and she cried with me. And the prayer team supported us in prayer. And that same month, Scott's life expectancy went from 18 months to, from 5 or 6 years up to 10 years to 18 months, possibly 2 years. I'll never forget the Zoom call or FaceTime call we had with our children. We were heartbroken. And y'all were here for us. So statistically right now, Scott should be in heaven, and he's still with us. And I'm here to say there is power in your prayers. And Scott, would you please just kind of raise your hand? And so in the fall of 2022, we purchased a townhome that we had been living in. It was a total God thing. And the timing coincided with Barrett inviting me to join the Fireside Girls, the Bible study. The women in that group embraced us immediately. And not only did they pray for us, they came over and they brought meals. They offered medical process advice, any gift that they had, cancer diet recipes. I mean, they were just so wonderful, and what a gift. Now, meanwhile, Scott's on hormone meds, and he's pushing through as well as anybody could. But there were side effects of depression, there's fatigue, and all of that led him to retire from his church in the fall of 22, and he grieved the loss. I was glad because that meant we could worship together and worship together here. And guess what he said last week on the way to church? I'm so glad we get to worship together with Waypoint. So he pushed through all the way through 2023, side effects, even working through end-of-life issues. And in February of 2024, Scott decided, with our oncologist and me, to stop taking the hormone meds because he wanted quality of life. And so, being a numbers guy, he asked, how long did he have to live? And the oncologist said, 6 months, if you do nothing else, or within the median of 6 months, you need to plan to start a new treatment. 6 months. And we prepared, and you helped and prayed. Just last week, after 14 months, not 6 months, after 14 months, Scott started on the new phase of treatment. Statistics be gone. Last week, Wes talked to us about grief and joy. And I've learned that Jesus holds him simultaneously. Jesus grieved over death. He grieved over Lazarus. And then Jesus, we're told in Scripture, but for the joy set before him, he faced the cross. He obeyed the Father, and he showed us that grief and joy can go hand in hand. So let me share some joys with you and grief. Joys, we've been taking and making Hillborn family adventures and creating memories and building legacy. Joy, in 2024, the day before Scott's mother's funeral, Scott was invited to baptize our daughter's boyfriend and his two daughters. They wanted to be baptized, and he was invited to do that with Transformation Church. July 2024, my father died. 6 weeks later, Scott's mom died, and we grieved. In December, Joy, our first grandchild, was born, a boy, named for Scott's dad and his other grandfather. Scott is not afraid of dying. He'll tell you that. His hope is in Jesus. I experience anticipatory grief. I live in the future instead of the present. And I try to remember that worry is pride-based. Tim Keller. And humility says, God's got this. And I'm not God. We know that Jesus is with us. And we know that he is in control. He's in control of life. He's in control of death. We know that Jesus Christ is good and he can be trusted. Where else would any of us place our hope but in Jesus Christ? And that's a short version of our story. And I know that some of you would like to share today where you have seen God at work in your life and where you need him to work. And so raise your hand and Chip will bring a microphone.